Hi, this is Michelle at Simply Scave Handmade, and today we're going to take a quick look at how I set my machine up for machine quilting and a few of the things that I have found over the years that I like to use. The first thing I'm going to say is that this is the machine that I machine quilted on the most. It's a home Singer machine. This one is a heavy duty machine, which simply means it has a little bit more motor power to it. But I only bought this because my daughters needed their sewing machines for themselves. I have machine quilted on just the basic standard Singer home sewing machines. I did have a Kenmore sewing machine and have machine quilted with all of them successfully. I purchased the heavy duty thinking that, maybe it would be a little bit stronger and last longer than a home sewing machine, but in all honesty, I've used a wide variety of home sewing machines for home quilting and have not had any problem. When I set up my machine, there's a few things over the years that I've come to really like. The first thing is this is called a Bigfoot, or it's basically a universal darning foot or quilting foot, and I've modified mine just a little bit. When you get this in the mail, this piece here is a solid loop, and what I did was I took a pair of needle nose pliers and just snipped that loop and made it more of an open foot. And I did that because I like to be able to see where the needle is threading through, and with the closed circle I had a harder time seeing where the needle was going in relationship to my fabric, so I did cut that. It also has a little bar on here when it comes in the mail that I took off that made a bunch of clicking noises, and I just didn't like it. So I'm not telling you to modify your foot. I'm just saying that's something I've done with mine, and I've really liked it. It has a nice tension here that gives you a lot of good resistance when you have a super thick quilt to work with, although most of the time when we're machine quilting, we have a rather thin batting. But this bar will help that. Another thing that I've really started using only in the past year was what's called a Supreme slider. And what it basically does is it covers up your feed dog area as well as this surface, your table surface, and it gives you a slick, smooth surface for the material to slide on. Most of my quilts were quilted without this Supreme slider, and I did fine. I had good success with that. This does help the material to slide a little more smoothly because it covers up all the little, the little creases and crevices down here along your machine that can sometimes cause, if you have pins in your basting, those can kind of snag. So the Supreme slider, it's not necessary, but it is a nice thing to have on hand, and they're available online at a very reasonable price. Something that I've just started using in the past few months are quilting gloves. These are called machinegers. They're universal. They pretty much one size fits all. You can use, right or left, front or back. They have a little bit of reinforcing on the fingertips. And the point here is a couple of things. One, you don't get, oils from your hands all over your fabric, but also it helps you to grip the fabric a little bit better than just with your plain fingers. And they're, again, not a necessity, but something I've started using that I really do like. When it comes to machine quilting, a few things that I've learned is some machines come with the ability to drop that feed dog. That's okay, but machines will generally function better if they're completely functioning in the way the manufacturer made them to work. If you drop the feed dogs, it does adjust how the machine functions and can be more of a wear on the machine. If you have a plate that simply covers the feed dogs, that's better because the feed dogs are still able to function, but they're not snagging the material. And if you're free motion quilting, then you definitely want to make sure you do not have those feed dogs moving around. I typically free motion quilt more than I use a walking foot. And that's just simply because I like the freedom that comes from being able to just free motion my machine around. What I want to do is take off the existing standard foot and just set it aside. And you'll find out this universal foot fits on here exactly like your other foot did. Very simple to install. The thread will go right through that little opening I've cut. If you have a solid loop there, then you'll have to thread it through that loop. You'll have to thread your stuff through the hole. Some sewing machines will come with a darning foot, and it's a metal circle. That is perfectly fine to use for free motion quilting. Once I've got my foot engaged, the other thing that I do is I come over here and I want to set my stitch length all the way to 0. And what that does, the stitch length being at 0, tells those feed dogs they'll bob up and down, but they won't move back and forth feeding the fabric. And that gives us the ability for our feed dogs to be exposed, but not necessarily be working the fabric. Once I have it in place, if I'm going to use a Supreme slider, now's the time to put it in there. And basically all it does is go right over everything, leaving the hole for the bobbin thread to come through. And you simply want to kind of just spread it around. It's got kind of a clingy, sticky back to it. And then from there, all we have to do is put our fabric in, just like we would be sewing anything else. Drop our foot down and start stitching. Now if you're free motion stitching, if you've got your stitch length at 0 and this free motion foot on, then that means that this fabric's not going anywhere unless you yourself move it. So that is why you want to either be able to grip it well with your hands, or you want to use the gloves to help give you a little extra traction. And what I like to do is work my hands around it like this, like my hands are a hoop, and I only worry about quilting what's right here inside of my hands where the hoop is. And I will move that fabric around however my design dictates. If I'm stippling or following a line, then I use this and I use my hands to guide that fabric. I don't want to be pulling or yanking on this fabric. I want to make a hoop with my hands and work through there. And one of the biggest tips that I've heard about free motion quilting is that you just really want to be consistent. You want to practice. For example, this is a practice pad. Practice your stitch design on something before you work on your actual quilt. It'll give you a little leeway to get the feel of it. If you're stitching in the ditch, you can definitely use the free motion foot or the darning foot from your machine. What I basically do is just, for example, let's say this is a stitch line on my machine. If this was my sewing line where I pieced my fabrics together, then I would start wherever I needed to start, and I would simply just feed that through myself at a slow and steady pace as I work my way, at a slow and steady pace until I got through that line. And like I said, I do have a walking foot that I didn't demonstrate putting on here, but you're more than welcome to use a walking foot. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please leave it in our comment box and we'd be more than glad to answer it for you.